everyone. This is Ronnie from Everything Vive. And I just wanted to put out a quick episode this week to go over my initial gameplay impressions of Torn. It's a really great game. I've been having a lot of fun with it. And since it came out just last week, I wanted to kind of get my thoughts out there as quickly as possible. We have a lot of content coming for the podcast in the near future. Several several developer interviews are in the works with some pretty cool titles that we're really excited about. So look forward to more content like that in the future. Before I get to Torn itself, I kind of wanted to mention just something that came up. One of our listeners actually is developing a title. The gentleman reached out to us from Whitway Studios, and he's releasing a demo of a puzzle VR game that they've been working on for a while. It looks like the game was originally announced in July of 2018, for what I can tell. So obviously they still have a lot of work to do on it prior to the actual release, but they are releasing their free demo on Steam this Friday. So that would be September 7th, 2018. So for anybody that's interested in just seeing kind of, the early stages of a game in development, and more particularly someone that's interested in kind of, trying something out that's in development and then offering feedback to the developers, I'm sure they'd be super grateful. And the more people that they can get to play their game prior to actually trying to nail down all of the specifics prior to release, the better. So the game that Whitway Studios is working on, and that free demo that's going to be out this Friday, is called People Cubed. And you spell cubed CU and then the number 3 ED. So that's People Cubed with a 3. Check it out on Steam. It's for free, so there's no downside to it. And like I said, the developer is a listener to the podcast. They've given great feedback themselves, and so that's really what they're interested in, is just hearing constructive criticism, I believe, and they just want people to try out the game and hopefully have a good time with it. So with that out of the way, I will get back to the real meat of this episode, which is my gameplay impressions of Torn. And Torn is a game that recently came out, earlier in August, the last week of August, I believe. It hasn't been out for very long, at most a couple of weeks, and it's by a development studio called Aspyr. And so I'm actually working on trying to get in touch with someone there to see if I can, talk to them about how this game was developed. But right off the bat, what I had heard prior to actually trying it for myself was that this is a puzzle VR game with where you're basically moving from room to room in a mansion, and I really didn't know anything else about it. But from the moment that I loaded it up, I could tell that I was in for a great experience. The production values, impressed from the very beginning. The score to the game, the music sounds great, and it adds to the immersion of the game. I mean, whether this is definitely one of those games that if you're not using headphones, I would probably recommend headphones, because there was a lot of great positional audio going on, as well as just the soundtrack, the audio score playing in the background when you're going from room to room, and it really sets a great mood and is dynamic enough to change based on kind of what's going on with the story. And it was just something that from the moment I started the game up, I just noticed it, from the beginning until I put it down. So just really fantastic sound design, and particularly the score itself is kind of it. It sounds great. It kind of has like a whimsical. When I was taking notes down, I said that it kind of reminded me almost like a Danny Elfman kind of Sam Raimi Spider-Man or esque kind of interesting kind of quirky vibe to it. But I'm not sure that there were later moments in the score that didn't remind me of that. So I'm not sure I can put down exactly, put my finger on exactly what it reminds me of. But it's definitely great. So, besides just the sound design and the score, the graphics themselves are also very impressive. And so, I mean, for me, it was kind of a mixed bag in terms of the graphics themselves are just strong from start to finish. At least from what I've seen so far, I've only gotten a chance to play the game for about an hour or so. I just want to mention that from the get go. This is more gameplay impressions than it is kind of a full review, I would say. Um, but at any rate, the graphics are super detailed, and what they really do a great job of, and this is the strength of this game itself, is they really do a great job of giving you a sense of place. So the sense of place and presence in this game is very strong. You start out, you start at the game out, you start the game off outside of this mansion, and the outside is full of overgrown vegetation that's surrounding the building, and there's readable signs kind of warning you to get out and all of that, and it really led me anyways to have a strong sense of believability in this world. I mean, before I even got to the mansion, it felt like this was a real place, and I was drawn in before I even knew really what I was embarking on, what my journey was going to be like. And that continues as you get into the castle or the castle, the mansion. One of the things I should mention is that they have a decent amount of graphical settings, like most games that have been coming out recently. Besides just the normal, kind of shader-ish type, detail and post processing, tabs. They also allow you to do super sampling in the game's graphics menu, and I was able on my 1080 Ti. Granted, that's a high end card, but on my system, which can sometimes struggle depending on how high I turn that stuff up, I was able to crank up the super sampling. I want to say to like 1.8 or so, which is almost double the normal resolution. I did turn down the anti-aliasing a little bit back down to medium since I'm already doing the super sampling anyways. I usually, for me anyways, the super sampling, if you're able to do it, is more effective than anti-aliasing anyways, as far as getting rid of jaggies and whatnot. So, but that said, I mean, on those settings with almost two times super sampling, I never had any kind of hitches in the game, and everything ran super smooth. So, and everything looks really great. It's one of those games I can tell that they spent a lot of time trying to optimize it, just as far as performance goes, because it's really smooth and works really well. The other thing about that I kind of tie into graphics, but it also kind of goes along with presence as well, and just the game engine is the physics in the game. And so one of the first things I noticed before I even knew really what the game was going to be about once I was in the mansion was the fact that the certain elements in the environment were interactive that you wouldn't necessarily always think would be, and not interactive to the extent that they were. So that the quickest example I can give of that, first there was some kind of police tape or danger tape that was blocking off a door that was going to lead into my first experience with the mansion. And when you walk through that tape, it kind of breaks, and you feel like it like it responds to you moving through it. So I mean, it wasn't perfectly real. Like some of it didn't break when I went through it, but you got the sense that it was interacting with you, and it gave a very positive impression. And then right when you first get into the mansion, one of the first things you see is a bunch of cobwebs, and these are thick cobwebs that are kind of hanging down from the ceiling across the walls of the bottom, kind of the lower levels of this mansion, almost like a dungeon looking brick corridor, if I recall. And just the thing, I almost don't remember much about the corridor other than those cobwebs, because the cobwebs are just so impressive. Literally, you go and try to touch or interact with the cobwebs, and they would stretch and kind of break based on how you moved your wands through them. And it was, I was impressed with how how interactive they were. And again, as a first kind of, I don't know if the developers intentionally put that there right near the beginning of your entrance into the mansion or not, but it was a really smart choice because there are some other elements in the game that are less convincing. Like right away after trying that, I went and found some glass, you know, some glass cups and tried throwing them on the ground to see if they would shatter realistically, and they didn't. So that was like, something that was disappointing, though I could imagine, depending on the game, especially since they they did such a good job of nailing down the performance in this engine. Maybe that would bog it down too much if the physics got too complicated. As I'll explain later when I get into kind of the gameplay, there is kind of a lot of manipulating of objects and physics based. All the that I've come across are somewhat physics based. So maybe that just would be too much for the engine to kind of bear. But yeah, so stuff like the interactive cobwebs, and then later on curtains that kind of have movable cloth that's realistic. Like you're used to seeing some of this stuff in AAA titles that are not in VR, but in my experience, I haven't seen a whole lot of that super interactive types of materials in a lot of different VR games yet. And it could be just I'm not playing the right games. I don't know, but it was just something that I noticed right away as being something a little special and something that was really cool. Like it made me feel like I was in the game. So that was awesome. And yeah, moving on. I mean, I should talk about the actual gameplay elements because and it's hard because it's more. I mean, like a lot of VR titles, Torn is more of an experience than it is just a series of systems and graphics and sounds and all that stuff. And I can't stress enough that the charm of this game is how all of it comes together into a cohesive package that is just super polished and just super engaging. Um, the gameplay. I mean, you are in this mansion, and there's all kinds of. While the mansion itself looks kind of like Victorian era, or I want to say like yeah, Victorian era. Like it looks old and classic, but then there's all of these wires and kind of old CRT monitors and tape displays, and I mean it's not quite H.G. Wells old or anything like that, but it has this kind of neat kind of this neat sci-fi classic aesthetic to it, and you don't really know what's going on, but as you enter this mansion and you see the juxtapositioning of all the technology, stuff in this room, and then you wonder kind of what the story is behind what's going on here, because no one's in the mansion as far as you can tell when you enter it. It looks kind of like something happened here. But it's vacant for the most part. So right away you're set to kind of explore the mansion, look around, and try to figure out what exactly this is and what's going on, and that leads you to the beginning of the story, which involves, and I don't want to get into too much details, and honestly I've only played so much of it anyways, but the story involves kind of finding out who the owner of this house was, who what has been going on here, and it involves you eventually getting a gravity wand or a gravity gun. I forget what they call it exactly, but basically lets you manipulate objects using the physics system, and then and then also some kind of a teleportation type travel system is what the mansion seems to be doing. But again, I'm only at the beginning, and so I'm not really giving anything away, regardless. But I'm not going to get into any more kind of spoiler territory. But needless to say, in order to kind of move through the story and reveal more and more of the plot, you have to solve different physics-based puzzle systems. And like I said, you get that gravity gun, and a lot of the systems the puzzles that I've played so far has to do with finding objects in the room kind of using the flashlight portion of the gravity gun to find the underlying symbols that are in some of these objects. Sounds kind of weird, but basically, think of each object as kind of like a key to parts of the puzzle, and you determine what key the object is hiding by using that flashlight. So you shine the light on that's connected to the gravity gun. You shine that light on a chair, for example, and you see a symbol underneath it. And that symbol you couldn't see without the flashlight. So you shine it on the object, you see what kind of symbol it is, and then you can use that same flashlight to then look at different circuits that are, that are hidden along the walls and floors of the mansion, and find where these specific kind of relay shapes would fit into that circuit. And you set out to complete all of these circuits to then unlock, and turn on more of the electricity in the building in these different puzzles. So the puzzles are basically you kind of fitting things together in order to close off circuits and then get things started. And that's at least what I've done so far. And it involves a lot of manipulating of objects. And thankfully, the way the gravity gun works is super intuitive and super easy. You pick things up and you're able to, with the trackpad on the Vive wands, move those items back and forth, and then you're able to rotate them pretty easily as well using the other pad, I believe. So you use one pad to move them forward and backwards in space, and then you can direct it obviously with the wand, and then with your other controller you can use the pad to rotate them within that field. And I felt like I was always easily able to kind of manipulate objects the way I wanted to. I never felt like anything was difficult or frustrating as far as the controls go, and that's saying a lot considering how finicky a lot of these physics type systems can be, especially in VR. But they really did a great job of making sure that everything works well, and it's just it's fun to kind of explore and experiment with. So that was definitely. In terms of moving around the environment, the developers did a great job of providing the player with solid options regarding locomotion. You can either just straight teleport. You can kind of do those quick dash blinks that kind of keep you in there. Kind of a mix between teleportation and just pure locomotion, or you can just move around using one of the pads. And I ended up using that middle quick dash kind of option. I like how those tend to work, but I mean, really, it just depends on what you're most comfortable with and what you want to do. But I commend the developers for implementing all of those different options from the get-go. And it makes it easy for people out there that have played a lot of VR to know, to get comfortable with the game right away. There is one thing, like as far as the teleporting, the dashing, I can't speak to the normal teleports, but as far as dashing, I wasn't able to kind of dash backwards, which was a little bit like I feel like other games will sometimes allow me to do that, and I kind of get spoiled. And in here you kind of have to turn around all the way, so I could, in order to move if you want to do a 360, there's no, at least on the Vive, there wasn't any way to really quick rotate or do anything like that. And so not being able to quick dash backwards without turning kind of makes you have to turn in the physical world first before you actually do the dash. So if you're trying to get if you're trying to do a 180 degree movement. So but that said, I mean, especially for the Vive, it works great. I haven't tried it with the Rift, so I don't know if they implemented some kind of a quick turning system there, or if there's a better quick turning mechanism in some of the other control methods, or I'm just missing something. But that was just something I noticed. But yeah, I mean, I'm kind of going through all of these systems, like I said, and explaining how they all work, because I think all of the systems work really well. And it was just something that, as I was taking notes when I was playing, I just noticed how well all of those individual aspects kind of formed what I was doing. But really, I want to stress kind of near the end of this description of my time with Torn, that it was really the overall experience that kind of sold me on this game. Uh, like I said, Torn is a very cinematic, polished VR title, and from the beginning opening credits when you start out in the forest, like I said, you fall, you find yourself in the mansion, I should say, pretty, within those first couple minutes. And then you're immediately taken through this kind of, it's almost like the CGI before, the original X-Men films by Bryan Singer, or some of those other, this kind of twisting and turning, but in VR, being able to move around. Intro sequence to Torn, where you get to see the developers and everything that they've worked on, and it's just really, like I said, with it's just a strong cinematic. You're in for something good from the moment you try this game out, and the voice acting, the graphics, the gameplay, everything just fits nicely into like this quirky, fun, laid back experience that I think is suitable for really anyone that's interested in playing something that really feels like you're in a real place, that you know that you want to get a strong sense of presence in. As long as you're not someone looking for just like a shooter or something like that, if you're willing to kind of to mess around with puzzle elements, or manipulating objects in a three-dimensional space, this game is definitely worth checking out. And the $30 price point, I think, is pretty fair. I don't know how long the game is per se, but based on even just the hour I played of it, I can tell you right away that I've spent more money on lesser products, in Steam. So this is one that I could definitely recommend, and one of the beauties of it is that it is so simple, and really all of the mechanics that I was able to kind of mess around with were just well explained and really straightforward. And I think this is a game that you could probably show to somebody that hasn't really done much in VR yet, and they would probably get it pretty quickly. So, and they would, like I said, they would be impressed, and they would, and the story does leave you with kind of a mystery element to want to progress and push forward. So you're able to have a good experience and see a lot of cool stuff quickly, but at the same time, it kind of leaves you wanting to find out more about what's going on, and everything is just so great sounding and looking and all of that, it just it's pleasant from when you turn it on till when you hopefully turn it back on again when you start playing it again. So yeah, those are my thoughts on my first hour playing through Torn, and I'll likely update you guys on a future Game Talk episode when I have Zane or Damon on here to kind of bounce back and forth on, and explain to them kind of what my playthrough was like. But I at least wanted to put something out there, like I said, prior to the game kind of being out of the news cycle, and also just wanted to get some Game Talk out there prior to some of these developer interviews that are coming. I know you guys love hearing about different games that are out there, wanting to know if something's worth checking out or not. And yeah, this is one, like I said, I mean, read the Steam reviews, obviously, to see what other people are saying. But, in my opinion, as long as you're cool with, kind of easy puzzle mechanics, nothing too challenging or anything like that. But if you like the kind of VR titles that just really give a strong sense of presence and immersion, and you want something that is a little bit more cinematic and kind of has a higher production quality value to it, then Torn is easily recommendable, and it's one of the coolest VR titles that I've played in a while. So I'm excited to play more of Torn, and not only that, but now I'm super excited to find out and learn more about Aspyr, and can't wait see future products from them, because if they continue to work on VR titles, this is one of those developers, you know, that you want to continue to look out for. You know, developers like, I don't know, Vertigo Games and Servios, all these other, kind of, high quality developers need corporate. I'm a huge fan of budget cuts. But yeah, some of those Alchemy, all these, like, kind of big name, these new developers that are becoming kind of big names in the VR field. I feel like Aspyr could potentially be one of those, if they if what they've been able to do with Torn is any example of what they're capable of. So with that, I think I've kind of rambled on by myself long enough. Hopefully the next game talk, I'll have one of the other guys on. Just really wanted to get this episode out, and thought it was better to get it out sooner rather than later, to wait on getting somebody else on the line here. So as always, we really appreciate you guys. If you can, add us on YouTube, even though we don't necessarily, we haven't been updating that as much with all of our episodes as we were doing in the past. Though I've been trying to upload a decent amount of live streams. So, and I'm going to continue to do that. So hopefully maybe later this week I'll have some more live streams up. And if you don't check it if you don't catch it when we're actually streaming, they do like the backlog of those streams, they do record, and they go on to our Everything Vive YouTube channel. So check that channel just to see if there's anything of interest that you might want to see us play. And if you have any feedback, honestly, like, I'm kind of new to the whole live streaming thing, so if there's something specific that you'd like me to try out on a live stream, if there's a game we've talked about in the past that you'd like to see us play that we haven't yet live streamed, even if it doesn't have anything to do with the video that you're watching, feel free to comment in the video and say, hey, it would be awesome if the next live stream covers X, Y, Z, whatever you think would be interesting, because we're always open to feedback. And likewise, please, subscribe to us on iTunes, check us out and Stitcher, wherever you're listening to us. And then Twitter is always a great place to reach out to us, and it's also something that I try to update regularly. So we're super excited, as always, about everything that's going on in VR, and looking forward to some of these developments in the near future. There's a lot of cool titles coming out. Creed is out near the end of the month, and so is the wireless adapter, the official adapter from that HTC and Display Link we're putting together. That's you can pre-order that now and get that by the end of the month. So there's a lot of really cool and exciting things that are on the horizon, and we'll be with you throughout these next few weeks and coming months and whatever, to kind of go through it all and try to make sense of it. So for now, take care, and look forward to talking to you guys in the future.